There are also, of course, folks who would harm others using bits. I grabbed some examples. They're ubiquitous. This is one about companies fighting against computer attacks from January. Actually, this started with some discovering that China had been doing some extra cyber spying. We know that we've had lots of intrusions from overseas. So there was a set of attacks that came from China, and then that led us to a review of our security policies, sort of in an ongoing way that kind of focused on them. The Chinese government is ratcheting up its cyber spying operations against the U.S., citing an orchestrated campaign against one U.S. company that appears to have been sponsored by the Chinese government. That led to discovering that American corporations are under much stronger attack than we had thought, often from overseas. Recent computer attacks on Google left every corporate network in the world looking a little less safe. Their confrontation with China over censorship and other issues caused us to look at the sort of way that Google works and the way that other companies work on the web, and finds that attacks from China and other countries point to the rising sophistication of such attacks and the vulnerability of even the best defenses. The connection of computing systems to the rest of the infrastructure implicates sort of security in every country to a degree that it never did before. The last major power outage across the Northeast, for example, was caused by the fact that the control mechanisms for our power grid are computer-based, right? And computers need power to operate. So if you have a power outage, one of the things that happens is you have this cascading control outage. Because as you lose computers, you lose control over the grid, and as you lose control over the grid, you lose computers, and then you lose power, and it cascades. So until the great blackout of the Northeast a number of years ago, we didn't have enough fail system backup power systems for that. But that's the case now with water, electricity, all across our infrastructure grids. They're all controlled by computing systems that require power. And so if you have cyber attacks that are effective, you've got bigger concerns than whether or not to take down your computers. Right? You've got bigger issues involved. Okay? So we know there are bad guys. We also know that there are folks who want to make a point. In that one of the ways that can be done now is with digital means. Right? You don't have to stake out a bank and have a big demonstration. You don't have to gather thousands of people in a space in order to have a protest, although you can. But you can also work, if you will, in social media or other online environments to do protests, to do political action. And in some cases, you've got weak security. The guys at Facebook and the guys at Twitter aren't, overly concerned about cyber terrorism. I mean, it's on their agenda. They've got procedures in to sort of take care of it, but they're not security experts. They're in a different kind of business, And yet, something like Facebook connects millions of people. So, attacking there is a pretty soft space, right? And yet gets you pretty wide participation in whatever it is you're doing. So we've got sort of a different kind of level because we have a lot more participants than we did when we had the phone company, the cable company, and maybe the two or three TV networks, and that was it. Right? Now you've got other ways to compromise folks, to get at people, to cause them trouble. We have significant concerns always about protecting youth. This is an environment in which a lot goes on at probably a different level than television, movies. There's a lot available on the internet that, questions about at what level should it be controlled, when should it be controlled. There is literally very little control. Right? This survey found that, generally speaking, kids are online a lot, and we know that data from other data sets, and their parents have no idea what they're doing. Now, that's not the same as the television. Parents might not have had full control over what their kids watched on TV, although in some homes they did. But they might not have had full control, but they generally had a pretty good idea what was being watched most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time, depending on where they put the television. When they put the television in the kids' room, the research says they don't have as much knowledge. But generally speaking, parents have a pretty good idea what the kids were doing on television. No idea on the net, essentially. And you're talking about, relatively speaking, young children. Now, there's data on websites that serve children, and there are laws in that area, in the United States at least. There aren't the same laws every place, but there are laws in the United States about what websites can do that focus on children. But the laws have to do with what information they can collect from the kids. They don't have to do really with the content. Right? So the privacy laws have to do with what information you can ask from minors, but they don't have much to do with what's on the site. So the question is, at what point do you intrude? One of the things that we know from communication information technologies is that folks do identity work, come to senses of who they are and their relationship with others through what they do on the computer. At what point do you intrude in a child's development because they're on the web? So, your parents wouldn't follow you to school and listen to your conversations with every friend that you have while you're at school. Right? That'd be a kind of privacy invasion that would be difficult. But should they get involved in all of your conversations if you're online? And at what age? What age should they stop doing that? The filtering software, the nanny software, is pretty rough on every kind of search and participation that's around it, so it's a real wide net, gets a lot of stuff blocked that probably shouldn't be blocked. There is this concern about what you do with children and where it kicks in, and how you sort of figure out whether young kids or teenagers are doing what it is that young kids and teenagers do, which is, as it says here, blow off steam, gossip. Whether you try to get involved in that or whether you just let it go, it's a concern. Now, we had concerns over predators online, and there are folks who do a lot of selling, a lot of programs, a lot of law enforcement folks, some private organizations, you probably have some contact with them, that spend a lot of time selling, promoting this notion that there's a lot of abuse online, that children are at risk online. Generally speaking, although again, you can always find isolated cases here and there that go against the general rule. But generally speaking, children aren't much at risk online. That is, most of the research says that there's a lot less concern from, for instance, pedophilia, that sort of thing. A lot less concern online than some of these folks in their programs would lead you to believe. It's a pretty easy target, right? Because there's pornography online. there are folks who get on in chat rooms and try to talk with kids inappropriately. And there are folks who get online and try to get people to, to meet them here or there. But the crime data is really pretty clear on this. Okay? Now that's not to say, what the data isn't definitive about what's going to happen. That's unfortunate, right? It tells you a little bit about what's happened. It isn't altogether predictive about what's going to happen. So just because the crime data says nobody's ever, or few, doesn't mean it's never going to happen. But it's way more likely, in terms of the crime data and what's happened, for a child to be molested by somebody who lives down the block than it is by somebody that they've met online. Okay? Or somebody who is a predator online. If you pull up the Illinois crime statistics for this zip code, you're going to pull up 18 to 24, depending on which block area you use. Sexual predators within 16 blocks here, none of them are cyber criminals. Okay? They're all guys and gals who are walking up and down the streets, picking on girls or little kids, okay? Or their girlfriends. Now that's not to say that there isn't risk, but it's a little overblown.